Cops of Reddit, what is some of the weirdest best excuses you've gotten from people you pulled over for speeding? Story 1. Not a cop, but my dad once got pulled over with my little sister and I in the car, and his excuse was that his kids really needed to pee. Unprompted, my sister, who was like 5 at the time, chimed in with, "It's okay, daddy. I just went in my pants a little bit." Cop let him go. Story 2. My dad was a cop. He told me how he pulled over an old man for speeding, and the gramp was yelling, "You pulled me over, because you know I have biscuits in the oven at home and they are burning now because of you." Story 3. My uncle got pulled over for speeding because he was late. He was on his way to my grandmother's his mother's funeral. The cop let him go with that explanation. He said it was his mom's last gift to him. Story 4. My dad, who is now retired, pulled over a young woman for speeding, and he said as soon as he got up to her window, she said, "Fuck, I am so sorry." She jumped out of her car and booked it to the side of the road while pulling down her pants and just exploded out of her. My dad then proceeded to nope the out without even giving her a verbal warning. I used his story in a college essay about how to avoid getting tickets. Thanks for the 4-0, Dad. Edit. I posted the essay on Shitty Life Pro Tips for everyone who wanted to read it. I'm on mobile right now, so account link's still new to Reddit, just check my profile for it. I'm gonna be deleting it in 24 hours. Story 5. Just finished officiating a small-town high school basketball game. It was a rivalry game that, while the outcome was never in question, got pretty heated between the two teams. Home team won, but the home coach also received a technical late in the game. On the way out of town with my co-official, I got up to highway speeds prior to the city limit sign, which was way out of the town surrounded by fields. The officer who had been at the game looks at us and say, "Y'all were the refs at the game tonight. I can understand why you would be in a hurry to get out of this town tonight." Then just walked back to his car, not even a written warning. Story 6. Not a cop, but I got pulled over for speeding, and the only words that came out of my mouth the entire traffic stop were, "I have to." He wrote me a ticket. Court date rolls around. The ticketing officer was present for a few cases. Judge asks me what happened. I said I had to. She asks the officer if this was true. The officer concurred. She then asked me if I made it home in time. I replied no and that I pooped my pants. She dismissed the ticket. Story 7. My cousin has told me this story about his grandmother. She got pulled over on I-95. She feigned ignorance and acted in your stereotypical old person ways. While claiming she thought that I-95 was the speed limit, he let her go. Story 8. Got pulled over for speeding, and when I rolled down my window, a bee flies in. I proceeded to freak the out and actually hit the officer with the car door in my rush to get out of the car. Told him I was allergic to bees and didn't have an AP pen with me. He actually got in my car and shooed the bee out. Only warning I got was to carry an AP pen with me. I'm not allergic to bees. Story 9. Obligatory. Not a cop, but when my twin brother and I were born, my brother had a lot of deficiencies to say, and one night his testicles swelled up to the size of a softball. He was like, the on this kid, man. This of course warranted a speeding trip to the hospital without dialing 911, and we were pulled over maybe half a mile from the house. Roughly 20 minutes from the closest hospital. The cop yells at us at how crazy we were to be going that fast, to which my dad yelled out the window, "My sons are the size of softballs." The policeman peered in the window, went all wide eyes, and ended up giving us a police over 100 miles per hour to the hospital, and he even escorted us into the emergency room. While in high school, my now wife and her girlfriend were pulled over for something in her VW Bug. While the cop was talking to them, a car screeched up with a guy driving and a girl slumped over in the passenger seat. The guy says his girlfriend was dying and needed to get to the hospital. The cop tells my future wife follow us to the hospital, and he'll finish the ticket and takes off through town with lights and sirens blaring, escorting the guy and his girlfriend at high speed, with my future wife trying desperately to keep up. She swears they were going 85 miles per hour through streets and intersections all the way to the hospital. Then they dutifully waited in the VW for about 15 minutes, while the cop escorted the people into the emergency room. After a while, the cop comes out and walk up to my wife's car, obviously very exasperated, and said, "When I told you to follow us to the hospital, I didn't mean right behind us." He just shook his head and left. No ticket, warning, or anything. Story 10. Not a cop, but my uncle got pulled over doing 102 miles per hour on his motorcycle circa about 2006 in Texas, flashed his military ID, and said he'd been to Iraq and was going to see his mama. Cop let him go. He was going to see his mom, but hadn't been to Iraq in over a decade. Story 11. I was a cop for several years in a rough city and eventually grew to dislike it. The weirdest excuse for excessive speed violation on a traffic stop was given by a younger, blonde, attractive female, in a convertible, who said in reply to the "Why are you going 55 miles per hour in a 20 miles per hour school zone?" question, "Was my belt pinched me?" At this point she grabbed her tiny belt buckle at the top of an ultra-short miniskirt and brought her knees up to each side of the steering wheel. I got the view she intended on me getting. I was in my early 20s, and for some reason I didn't have the response you would think a guy my age would. It somewhat felt insulting. I returned to my car, wrote her a ticket as I would have anyone for that much over the limit, and then wrote her actions on the back of the ticket for the judge to review. Once she realized she was getting a ticket, her entire demeanor changed. She instantly became irate, snatched the ticket out of my hand, slung my pen back, and drove away. Once released, that reaffirmed I made the right decision in writing the ticket. Story 12. I got pulled over while running late to my friend's going away party. My car was real old and dirty, and my brother just so happened to have drawn on my side mirror with the quote "Dilly Vision" a couple days before. When the cop came back from running my license, He read the quote, and busted out laughing. He didn't even finish talking about a possible ticket or anything, just said slow down a bit and have a good night. Story 13 obligatory, not my story blah blah blah. My mom's cousin was visiting us in Canada from the United States and my dad took him out driving around the countryside. Of course they brought a couple beers along for the ride. So they are just moseying along the dirt roads and my dad is pointing out the different crops and whatnot. And a cop pulls up behind them and gives them the lights. So my dad, who was only going 20 kilometers anyway, pulls over and my mom's cousin was freaking out. Beers are long gone anyway, and the bottles were already tucked in the drawer under the passenger seat, so my dad isn't too worried. The cop walks up and before he can say anything my dad says, "Sorry if we slowed you down, officer. I'm just so drunk I can't even find my house. I can't even think straight. The old bag we stole this car from is screaming in the trunk. I thought I hit her hard enough. Guess not." The officer then says, "Well alright, do what you can to get home safe." My dad never told my mom's cousin he was friends with the cop. Story 14 My grandpa was a noble shit kind of guy. I can't remember exactly why, but he needed to get to the hospital very quickly. Officer pulls him over clocked at a little over 100 miles per hour. Cop comes up to the window and my grandpa says, "Look, I know you pulled me over because I was speeding, but now that we're stopped I'm going to have to resume at 150 miles per hour to make it on time." Cop let him go and gave him an. Story 15 Not a cop, but one tried to pull over my friend's grandmother and she just drove all the way home. When they were in her driveway he got out to ask her why she didn't stop. Instead of an answer she said, "Well, if you're here, grab a bag and help me bring in my groceries." I guess he thought it was so funny that he didn't bother giving a ticket. Story 16 I guess a bit late to the party. Not a cop and wasn't pulled over for speeding. I was just driving home after long night at work. At about 3 or 4 a.m., round was completely empty except for me and cop car. I was pulled over and cop told me that no one drives under speed limit at such hour unless they have something to hide. Story 17 I was like 8, and my dad was driving. We were in DC, where all the traffic lights are on the side of the road instead of hanging over the middle like they are in the suburbs. We were on our way to my uncle's wedding, and got pulled over for running a red light. So my dad is this like bearded biker guy, in a tux, who is the most gregarious human on the planet. He remembers everyone's first and last name forever, and is just so happy to see or meet anyone every time. So routine traffic stop questions turn into a now best friends type conversation. "Where are you guys headed? Blah blah blah," and note this is pre-GPS pre-MapQuest era, and we ended up getting a police instead of a ticket. I guess it's not really that unusual or unexpected. A whole family clearly dolled up for a wedding. We don't live in the city, and we don't know where this church is. Cool. It's not like he was driving like a maniac. No need to be about it. It's just so my dad's such a him thing to do. He's just so nice that everyone wants to help him out all the time. Kinda sickening, but also super cute. Story 18 My sister loves to chew on ice. Yes, she knows it's bad for her teeth. She's anemic too, which is probably why. Anywho, she was at a gas station and usually you pay like 50 or less for a cup of ice. It was the good ice. She got that in gas and they told her don't worry about paying for the ice. She ran out super excited yelling the ice was free. She was incredibly happy. I was with her. We were on a somewhat more traveled country road, but not super busy at that time, and she was speeding. I did tell her to slow down, but she was chewing her ice, singing along to the radio and was going over maybe 10 miles per hour over. If that, we got pulled over. And she got super nervous. She blurted out about the ice right away, and said she got carried away and would never do it again. He actually laughed. He gave her warning. He saw the cup of her ice and asked which gas station because his daughter loved ice too. Story 19 I got pulled over after leaving a firefighter's funeral heading to fire training. Full dress uniform along with my dad who was also in full dress. Professional courtesy goes of a way within reason. Only 20 km over the posted so it wasn't terrible. Story 20 Once my mom and brother got pulled over for speeding, and my mom got out of it by telling the officer that it was her son's birthday and that they were going to the orthodontist. Story 21 Not a cop, but I work for an old man who used to be in the Air Force. For a while he was stationed in Newfoundland I think and he had no driver's license but he owned a car. He was doing 90 in a 60 and the cop that pulled him over said, "You were really flying there. Let me see your POLTS license." So he showed him his POLTS license and was let off with a warning. Story 22 Not a cop, but I was at Fort Bragg for a bit and the 18th Airborne Federal Litigation NCO could renegotiate on-post tickets. We had an old lady walk into the office followed by her husband. They sat down with the FLNCO and the husband stared at her while she read from a small piece of paper. "Lady, I didn't realize I was driving 55 miles per hour in a school zone going the wrong direction down a one-way street. I feel the MP that pulled me over was rude. FLNCO, okay? Tell you what, I can knock the 55 miles per hour down to 10 over, but I can't change the wrong way." Story 23 Not a cop, but my dad got pulled over for speeding in a little town. Right as the cop comes up, my sister, who was probably 3 at the time, starts bawling in the back seat, like screaming. My 2 other siblings and I are rolling our eyes and covering our ears and he gives the cop an apologetic look and says we're just trying to get home. This was also like 10 p.m. at night after visiting family an hour away. The cop let us go with a warning and conveniently my sister stopped crying a little ways down the road. Story 24 I'm American, was driving in Canada and got pulled over for speeding, played stupid and pretended I thought the 100 km/h speed limit signs were in less per hour, got off. Story 25. A few years ago, I got pulled over for running a stop sign that I never saw. Cop comes to the window, sees a very pregnant woman clearly about to cry, and before he can talk I stutter something along the lines of I am so sorry I didn't see it, I'm in labor and I'm scared and I have to go get my boyfriend to go to the hospital and I'm sorry. He asks where my boyfriend works 5 minutes away, asks if I'm okay to get there. Tells me to drive safe and leaves with a half amused half confused smile. I ended up not giving birth that day, but I legitimately thought that was it. Story 26. I don't care if this story doesn't belong here, I need to tell it. I ran a barely red light turning left and promptly pulled into a McDonald's parking lot. I immediately turned into the long winding drive-through that goes behind a building, and saw in my rear-view mirror a cop turned his lights on and sped up to me. It was too late for me to stop or turn around, so I just went through the drive-through and ordered as per usual, expecting to be pulled over once I reached the other side. Because of the brick building I couldn't see anything, so I didn't know what my fate would hold. I got my food and pulled out of the drive-through and the cop was gone. Never got a ticket. Story 27. My mom got stopped once coming home from the grocery store. We were buying food and drink for my upcoming graduation party. We were going 55 in a 35. The cop says to my mom, if you can give me an excuse I've never heard before, I'll let you go. My mom sighs and says I don't have one. I was just asking her if she thinks we have enough soda for her graduation party. The cop looks in my mom's back seat to see 15 I think cubes of soda and exclaims, holy soda. Okay, that's one I've never heard, you're free to go. Story 28. I once read this comment on Reddit where this dude was speeding because he needed to take a real bad. He got pulled over in the street he lives in. He said to the cop, see that house over there? That's my house. I'm gonna sprint over there real quick before I'm my pants. Then I'll be back and you can give me my ticket. If I remember correctly, the cop found it funny and the guy didn't get a ticket. Story 29. I got pulled over doing 140 km/h in an 80 on some dark as back road in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. Cop comes to the window and asks for the usual. I look at him and say, sir, I was speeding because about 10 kilometers back I saw someone dressed as a creepy clown standing in the side of the road. This was late 2015, early 2016 when that crazy clown thing was going on. He just looks at me, sighs, says fucking Warner Boys again. I'm gonna go talk to them. Have a good night and keep it under 110. And let me off. He could have suspended my license, arrested me and towed my car. TLDR, good guy cop understands fear of clowns. Story 30. My wife tried to tell an officer that she had to speed up to get up the hill. She was doing 58 in a 35. In a school zone, thankfully at night. Didn't work. Story 31. Obligatory, not a cop. I used to live in Sacramento. There are two freeways, one called I-80 and the other Business 80. I was on my way out of town to see my elderly mom who has Alzheimer's. I was running late and realized I was on bus 80 not int 80. If I continued on bus 80, I would have to detour, loop around, and add more than 30 minutes to the ride, so I put my signal on, checked my mirrors, and began merging into multiple lanes to I-80. At least 5 lanes of maneuvering success. Within minutes, I am pulled over. Do you know how fast you were going? Why were you in such a hurry? I was concentrating so hard on the maneuverings I had no idea. He clocked me at 75 miles per hour in a 50 miles per hour area. I explained the long detour, being late, yada yada. He says that was some skillful lane changes you did. I am impressed. Watch the speed to your moms. Have a good day. Hut W Choti. Story 32. Not real, but a joke my dad used to tell, probably stolen from someone else. The cop would say, I've been waiting on you all day. The person responded, I tried to get here as fast as I could. Story 33. Pulled over a lady speeding in a school zone during the time when buses and kids were arriving in the morning. The first thing she said to me was, do you know how hard it is to drive with no hands? Story 34. My go-to move was telling cops my dad was a fire chief. He was, and many of the guys knew him. Even if they didn't, it was always a free pass or a lesser ticket. Got popped doing 59 in a 35 and the cop said he'd love to cut me loose on it, but said he's got to write me something. So I took a no-point seatbelt ticket for 75 over a multi-point 20 miles per hour moving violation. The best I got off on was a 85 in on the highway. That's after I slowed down for seeing him. This was all in high school and college. I don't even drive that often anymore. We were playing the music really loud per my sister. 1.75 of vodka shoved under driver's seat. Us drunk in the back seat. Broke out laughing. Just a warning. Story 35. Supposedly my mom got pulled over in the mid-90s, and the cop asked why she was going so fast, and she said, I'm so sorry. I'm cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and he let her off cause she made him laugh. Story 36. My ex-husband was a SGT on the local police force. He mostly had horrific stories, but once he pulled over a woman and she just had this look of desperation about her. She said she had to go to the bathroom, but he was like, yeah, don't we all? Well, while he was back in his car, running her through sick and whatnot, he saw her jump out of her van, run around to the big door, and jump inside. He got out to check what was going on and caught her shitting into a box in her van. She had irritable bowel syndrome, or something similar. She got away without even a warning. I used to ride with him a lot, and once he pulled over a young man who was not driving straight. Of course he thought the kid was drunk, but it turns out he had a lazy eye and had not yet mastered driving a straight line when his eyeball wandered. Story 37. When I was a Texas state trooper, had this little story happen to me. Stopped a car. Don't remember exactly why. Probably for speeding in the middle of the night, probably 10 miles from town. As I was approaching the car, a truck driving by blew a tire. Now I know a tire doesn't sound exactly like a gunshot, but it's close and loud. On instinct I draw my sidearm and take cover behind the rear of the vehicle. About the time I get into cover what I really heard clicked. Felt dumb, holstered my sidearm and approached the vehicle. Talked with the driver. He told me that when the tire blew he thought I shot at him too for just a split second. We decided to go our separate ways with our funny story. Story 38. My cousin is a police officer who works at the border between Canada and the United States, as well as some patrolling in the Niagara Falls area. He pulls over a speeder one day. The excuse the speeder had was that he thought you couldn't get pulled over in Canada for speeding, and that it was just an American thing the government made up to keep control over the citizens. Story 39. I was pulled over by a state trooper. I told the cop about the 10 rule, where drivers are allowed a 10 buffer over the posted speed limit because of possible technical errors in the speedometer. I was let off with a warning. Story 40. My dad was a cop and he pulled someone over for making a really wide turn. The driver told him that his wife asked him to pick up a pizza but gets really angry if the pizza slides to one side and gets crushed. My dad laughed so hard, he let him go. Another story, I was pulled over for speeding, like 90 miles per hour on the freeway with a speed limit of 70. My husband just had dental surgery and literally had 2 ice packs tied to his face, Bugs Bunny cartoon style, and was gonna have to throw up from the anesthesia. I was pissed I had to stop. The cop comes to my window and asks if I knew how fast I was going. I said, yeah, my husband is going to throw up. I need to get him home. Can I leave now? The police officer was so flustered at my anger and urgency. He let me go but said he would follow me home to make sure I didn't speed. No ticket for me. Story 41. Not a cop, but the best I've heard is from my dad. This was circa early 2002 I would guess, which will be relevant later. My dad got pulled over for speeding on his way to work. Cop walks up to the window. Cop, you were going 70 in a 60, sir. What were you thinking? Dad, I was thinking about Osama bin Laden. Complete straight face. No hesitation, no follow-up, just Osama bin Laden. Cop gave him a warning and sent him on his way. Story 42. Not a cop, but when Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic came out, a buddy of mine was addicted to it really bad. He lived about an hour away from his work, went in that day and told his boss to off, just so he would be sent home. On the way home he got pulled over for speeding. Told the cop he understood why he was pulled over, but he really needed to and was speeding so he didn't himself. Cop let him go. Story 43. I actually used to be a patrol officer. This was around 1999 and we had just gotten those radar guns and I had been out all day actually trying to catch speeding cars. Now officially I was just doing that, but there had also been a report for a stolen car. Sometime in the late afternoon I am eating lunch when a car speeds by while I don't have the radar gun out, but the guy was clearly speeding. I remember throwing my lunch onto the passenger seat and starting to chase him. As I drive behind him and get closer I notice that it matches the description for the stolen car. It was a maroon Chevy Silverado which came out in 1998 when The Undertaker threw mankind off HLL in a cell, and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. Story 44. As a high schooler, I got pulled over after curfew one night. The cop asked me why I was driving so fast and I said I was trying to get home before curfew. When asked why I didn't leave earlier I told him I was too busy making out with my girlfriend. Really didn't want to leave. He laughed and then said, just be safe, kid. Still ticketed me but bumped the speed down to avoid reckless charges and told me to make sure I fought it in court because it would probably get tossed. He was right. Story 45. Probably too late for this post, but my dad pulled over a guy for going too slow on the highway. His reason for going too slow was that he got a ticket for speeding the day before. Story 46. My ex-boyfriend got pulled over, and when asked if he had any weapons in the car he responded with I have extraneous guns in the trunk, at which point the cop calls for backup only to pop the trunk and have about 20 Nerf guns in the back. They all had a good laugh. Story 47. My first car was 2002 Buick Century complete with Grandpa Gold paint. To make the car even more of a joke I installed a Dukes of Hazzard horn, got pulled over for doing 26 kilometers per hour over. The cop joked about how this car could even go that fast and then asked me if there was any engine modifications to it. I said no, then he asked why there's a couple red tubes under the grill. I pressed the horn and he laughed, told me not to jump any rivers, then drove off. Love that guy. My brother was once pulled over with my autistic nephew in the car. Nephew is going on in that rapid-fire repetitive way scolding his dad for speeding. He then turns his attention to the police officer. Hey, you're a sheriff, right? My dad is going to get a ticket because he broke the rules. Officer explains he is not with the sheriff department. Not quite realizing what he has just stepped into, nephew is undeterred and repeats the phrase above interspersed with scolding his dad. Officer tries several times to halt the assertion he is a sheriff, unsuccessfully as nephew is unstoppable when he has a thought lodged in his head. He has info to write the ticket and is peppered with yet another you are a sheriff, right? He just hangs his head and says yes I am a sheriff, gives nephew a sticker that looks like a badge, and lets dad off with a warning. Nephew ended up lecturing his dad for weeks about speeding. Guess the officer decided he was not going to bring that down on himself again. Story 48. My dad is a retired Marine officer. He was working his civilian job post-corps and was late for a meeting in a city about 1 hour 15 minutes from where my parents live. Said he had like 30 minutes to get there. He said he got pulled over doing about 100 miles per hour on a road that is either 70 miles per hour or 55 miles per hour. Can't remember whether he said he was on the 70 or the 55 part. He had his retired military ID on top of his driver's license, so when he opened his wallet to give his license to the cop saw his ID. My dad said. The cop asked, "Are you a Marine?" My dad told him he was a retired LT call. The cop said, "Semper Fi, sir, slow down," and let him go. Edit: there isn't really an excuse in there, but I think it's a good story. Story 49 Not a Cop. In 1990, my mom went into labor with my sister, and she was coming fast. My dad raced to the nearest hospital and got pulled over for speeding. The cop was very understanding and nice, put on his sirens and told my dad to follow him. My sister was born an hour after my mom went into labor, so they got to the hospital just in time. Story 50 I have a friend who's a retired state trooper. One day while we're playing golf I asked him, "Is there anything I could do to get out of a ticket?" He said two things. One, pull over as fast and as safely as possible. Cops hate having to chase you down, and it usually pisses them off too, and this is very important, never lie. Cops have heard every lie in the book. Just tell the truth and you have a shot at avoiding a ticket. Fast forward a few years, I get pulled over for speeding. I pull over fast, tell him I was going to a golf tournament and running behind. He runs my license and lets me off with a warning. Story 51 If you're an auto enthusiast, you probably remember Denise McCluggage, one of the earliest female race car drivers and a contributor to Auto Week for many years. She loved telling the story of when she got back late from a press trip and picked up a new Mercedes-Benz press car at the airport. She lived in New Mexico and just wanted to get home, so she blasts down the highway at 95 miles per hour. At the time, Denise was probably 75 years old, a short, little old wrinkled gray-haired lady. She flies by a cop but just keeps going. A few miles down, when she was out of sight of him, she slowed down to highway speed. The cop catches up and pulls her over. When he walks up to her window, he sees this frail old lady. He asks her, "Ma'am, did you see a Mercedes this color go by you?" Denise answers, "You better believe it, of course the office did," and let her go. She was great, and a hell of a driver, R.I.P. my friend. Story 52 Cop pulled me over while I was speeding to pick up my drunk friend to keep her from driving home. As soon as he was at my window, I handed him my license and registration before he asked, and said, "Yes, I know I'm speeding. I'm trying to keep my drunk friend from driving home, so can I have my ticket and go?" He handed me my stuff back and told me to go a little slower. Yes, I stopped her. She was indeed faced and probably would have killed herself or someone else if I didn't get there. She apologized for the stupidity the next morning. Story 53 Not a cop, but when I was in high school my dad was driving me home from practice and got pulled over because he'd forgotten to turn his headlights back on after he'd turned them off while idling outside the gym. The cop saw me in the passenger seat and said, "How you doing tonight, son?" I pointed out that I am a girl. Cop got so flustered at her mistake that she just let us go, apologizing profusely the whole time. Story 54 On an English motorway in a shitbox Polo that I bought for a 100. I'm doing 85 miles per hour on a 70 miles per hour motorway. Didn't see the copper until he was beside me. A quick check 15 over. Too late to brake. So the old nod, finger off the wheel and carry on at the same speed. Nod back and all is well with the world. I love English-style policing when it's this casual. With my old man in the Netherlands, it's been raining for a while. Not super hard but consistent. Water streaming off the windshield. Dad overtakes this guy, speeds up to do it. Then he sees the flashing lights behind him. It's the Rijkspolis and he swears, "This will cost me." It's an open-top convertible. WDF, the police driver just guns it. They must be close to swimming in the thing and I don't understand how they don't lose control or the thing shorted. It looked like a F1 takeoff. Story 55 My first time getting pulled over for speeding I was 18. I was running late and my boss had this stupid policy that if I'm even 1 minute late then I don't work for the day. Problem is at the time I lived about an hour and 45 minutes from work, so driving all that way in 2007 when gas was over $4 wasn't worth it. Open lonely road going 65 and a 40. See the cop at the last second and attempt to slow down. He pulls me over. It's a trooper. I also have an expired registration. I figured I was getting my car towed but I'm still an honest person. He goes, "Do you know how fast you were going?" I said, "Well, I saw you, so if I hit the brakes in time about 50, he says 57. I'm like, "Alright, not terrible." He then asks why I was speeding. I tell him I'm running late for work. He asks where. After I tell him he goes, "Really? That's over an hour from here." I said yes, and I've been on the road for half hour coming from X town. He heads back to his cruiser to enter my info in. Finally gets back to me after 10 minutes and says, "I find it admirable that you are willing to travel so far for a job. Keep up the good work." Instead of towing my car he just gives me the cheapest possible speeding ticket and a fix-it ticket for my registration. My boss let me work when I showed him the ticket. Story 56 Not a cop, but we were speeding for the hospital because my mother was in labor. Now keep in mind my father is a crazy, experienced driver. He was skidding red lights to get the fastest way possible to the hospital. With my mom screaming and hitting, a cop started chasing us. We pulled into the hospital. He started to question us, then my mom started screaming and cursing, and then the cop said, "I understand." He ran in and got us a stretcher. Really nice dude. Story 57 My friend told me this story. I don't know how true it is. When Ford introduced the 1983 Turbo Coupe he put an order in as soon as he could, and took delivery as soon as they started shipping. A few days later he was in eastern Washington speeding across the empty desert when he got pulled over. The conversation went like this: "Officer, do you know how fast you were going?" Friend, "No. The speedometer stops at 80. Officer, you were going 130 miles per hour. Friend, I didn't know this 4-cylinder could go that fast. Officer, there is no way that's a 4-cylinder. Friend, oh, it sure is. Officer, if it's a 4-cylinder, it'll let you go. My friend pops the hood, gets out, opens the hood for a few seconds, then closed the hood. The officer told him to slow down and have a nice day before he returned to his car and drove off. Story 58 wasn't me or really an excuse, but it's the best way I've ever seen to not get a ticket. I was in a big white van filled with food for my restaurant that my sous chef and I were taking to an offsite. He was driving and would always speed no matter what. Well, on that day we got pulled over. Before the cop could even get out his car, my chef was making a phone call. This was all I heard. Yeah, hey buddy, one of these just pulled me over while I was on the way to the party. Yeah, thanks man. The cop finally got to our window, and before he could begin talking, my chef holds up both hands with his phone in one and tells the cop he should take this call. The cop seemed a bit irritated but handed the phone back, told my chef to slow down and have a good day. Turns out my chef was good friends with the sheriff, and we just so happened to be holding the food to the party he was at. When everything was said and done, my chef introduced me to the sheriff, and I asked what he told his officer. He replied, "I told him that making your boss and his bosses wait longer for their meal isn't worth a lousy ticket.